Welcome to the Whytebooyee podcast, brought to you by apparel and printing out of Bayonne, New Jersey. Just a quick disclaimer, the views and opinions from anyone on this podcast are just for the show and not to be taken seriously at all. Now on to the show. Yo, what's going on, people? Episode 2. Thanks for sticking around. I'm taping this today on Wednesday, the 24th, I think it is. Today was a better day, I'll tell you that, man. First day we had 50-degree weather, sunny, it was beautiful out. I work outdoors as a utility worker, and let me tell you something, it has been a blessing than working in the pouring rain and snow that we've had since probably the end of January, right up until, what was it, last week, right? Yeah, well, the beginning of this week. Yeah, man, the beginning of this week. We had like 22 inches a long time ago, 2 weeks ago. It's been pretty insane, man. And I work in New York City, so it's not an easy place to work or get around, especially when you dump that much snow in it. All right, let's get back to the show about this. Well, last time I left off with making transparencies. Let me just clarify a little bit because at the end of the show, at the end of my recording, I was getting a phone call, so I was trying to do a phone call and use a computer to type out at the same time. What I was saying is that after spending all that money buying stuff and getting things, like I had to go to Lowe's and I was picking up some stuff because I knew I wasn't going to be able to afford to buy everything else that a professional person was going to use. So I was doing this on a whim, and I didn't have any extra money really to spend, besides maybe like $100 or something like that. So I mean, it wasn't like I was DIYing it, if you want to call it that. Basically that's what it was. So what I was saying is if you take paper, and this is what I realized, and I made a lot of screens like this too. If you take paper, right? If you have any kind of detail, like that's a really, really, really good detail, I do not advise in doing this, right? But if you take regular paper and you print your design onto the paper, regardless if it's 8x11 or 11x 19 or 30, whatever you're doing, you print onto it, right? You get yourself some vegetable oil, right? This is called in a pinch. This is a pinch. You don't want to do this, but it made a lot of screens for me that were, I was in a bind, you know what I mean? And this was a little bit later down the run, but I used it, because I was trying things out all the time, stuff like that, trying to get my first screens made. But if you use the oil and you rub the oil onto the paper and you keep rubbing it on, make sure that the whole piece of paper is saturated. When you it looks like a vellum piece of paper when it's done. You can say that it does, but I mean, you can see light come through it. You know what I mean? You would have to adjust your burn times because it's not all 100%, transparent. That light's coming through, but there's enough. And if your ink is dark enough on your print, right? Like if you were using a laser jet, or that's what I was using at first, was a laser jet. If you were using a laser jet, you got a pretty dark picture. So I was able to use that. Now, to do it, what I was doing was I was reading, online a whole bunch of other people who were doing it as DIYs, and they were using lamps, like heating lamps, stuff like that, 100-watt bulbs and all this other stuff, and they all had their own setups of how they were doing it and how to get it to burn and all this other stuff. So I kind of figured out, some kind of crazy equation in my head. In my dining room, I have a ceiling fan, and the ceiling fan is right over a dining room table. So what I kind of did was I actually took my son's iguana lamp. It was 100-watt UV bulb. Because UV is what you want to use to expose. So luckily he had 100-watt. Because even the table I have now is the real light table to expose my screens. Is 15 watt, 6 bulbs. Was it 6? It's either 6 or 7 bulbs. You know what I mean? So it was close. But I mean, listen, it does a better thing when you have the table, the lighting table, because it's exposing the entire area of the screen. You know what I mean? When you're using the iguana bulb, you really just, you know, got to be careful on how you're doing it. So I took the iguana bulb from my son. I was like, hey, let me borrow that for a second. So I took it and went to my dining room table, and I actually made this kind of rig so that it hung from my ceiling fan in the dining room. So I was able to adjust it too for like depending on how I was going to do it. But you know, the next step is to get the emulsion on the screen. So you know, at the time, I don't know if I was using a pink polymer. I don't know what it was, but it was a pink color. All right, it's probably like a high solid one, you know. But so I actually did it with a paintbrush, right? I did it with a fat paintbrush, like, you know, a fat bristle, meaning like a long, you know, one that you would paint your house with inside, like your interior. So I actually dipped it in and I painted it. It sounds really horrible. And I mean, I didn't get really a good clear coat, if you want to call it that, but I got enough that the whole screen was done. And then once I put the first layer on, you know, one on one side, did one side, then I did the other side. I came back and I redid it just so I can like glaze it, you know, to make it look a little better than being a rough paint job kind of deal. Well, whatever. That kind of worked. You know, I let them dry, this and that. So then the next thing, what I had to do is I had to figure out a way to put the print on the paper. I mean, put the print on the screen, right? And to be able to, you know, keep it there and put pressure on it. So I've been watching other people's videos and they use glass, but you have to make sure that the glass is just glass. Nothing has a coating in it. You know, some of the glasses, like, you know, if you're using pictures in your house and stuff like that, some of the glasses have a coating in it, you know, to keep the picture from being, you know, from the sun and stuff like that. So I didn't know that. Trust me, I didn't know that at first. So what I did it was funny. People would come over my house and they'd be like, you know, looking at the pictures on the walls and there's glass missing out of the pictures. And they're like, what? And, you know, there's big family pictures and I'm taking the glass out because, you know, at first when you're starting to do this, you know, you need that to weigh it down, you know, like to put it onto so that it doesn't move and, you know, the glass is actually from the light too, is actually, you know, spreading the light around, if you want to call it, you know, spreading it. So I did that and I was holding it, you know, to put pressure on it. You know, I've broke a lot of glass. Let's just say I broke a lot of glass and I used a lot of pictures I used a lot of glass from the pictures off the walls, you know, while I was learning this. Eventually I went out, you know, and I went to the glass place that's in my town and I got a thick piece of straight glass, you know, pretty thick, you know, a lot thicker than, you know, you would get from a picture frame. And I left it on, you know, that's how I was burning the screens because it was heavy too. So it's not like it was going to move or anything like that. So I, you know, eventually ended up doing that. But the whole process of doing that and like even the first couple times, like even doing it with the paper that I used the oil from. The only drawback of doing that, you know, of doing with the oil is that the screen becomes all oily too. You know, and you know, the funny kick about it is that we actually burnt screens doing that. And I mean, they didn't look bad. They didn't look bad at all. I mean, the screens themselves were good quality screens. So I guess even though you're using a crappy, you know, kind of photo idea, you know what I mean, that, you know, it still worked, you know what I mean? And it looked pretty good, you know, but I wasn't too sure of what I wanted to do and everything else like that. So, you know, I was doing just things, you know, for my brother-in-law, like t-shirts for his trucking company that he works for and stuff like that. So I was, you know, he gave me the design. I made the design on the computer and, you know, I was pretty bad at it, but I mean, it looked good, you know, and I was able to print t-shirts for him for his business. Well, for the business that he works for, he was buying the t-shirts and that because they were charging him like $25 for a t-shirt. I was like, yo, go to Michael's, get a $5 shirt and I'll print it for you. You know, what's the big deal? So, I mean, that worked out fine. I was doing that and this and that, but I wanted something better for myself. So I actually went to Staples. Was it Staples or Office Max? Whichever one. I don't know which one it was. But I actually was making my first Whytebooyee shirt. And that was the first Whytebooyee design that I was doing. And it was, I forgot, I bought the lettering because I had to buy the font. Now, The worst part about it is I bought the font, I ran it for a long time, and then I lost the font. And I don't even know where it went because one of the computers that I was using at the time burnt down. My son was also using a computer, and my daughter was too for video games and stuff like that. But it was a good computer at the time. But they, all right, yeah, I'm saying they blew it up, but everybody's gonna be like, oh, it was you did it. Don't blame other people, stuff like that. But whatever. Yeah. So the first design, which was the first Whytebooyee that I made, I actually made it. What was it by? It was like 5 by 11 or 5 by 10. Well, 10 wide, 10 long, 5 wide, and I actually printed it out. And I took it with me and went to Office Max or Staples, whichever one. I think it was Office Max. I'm not sure. And I had them print out the transparency for me. So I was like, let me get it done right. Let me do it the right way. So I actually I had them make me 2 transparencies. Or was it 5 or something? I don't know, whatever it was. But I wanted 2 transparencies because I really wanted it dark. Because, I had such a great burning table. It was the best, my iguana light. You know what I mean? And I actually had to, like, even with that iguana light, it was very hard to judge, like, depending on the temperature in the room, depending on the light bulb, depending how far away you are on it. The burns on the screen would take at least 15 minutes, and even with that, like washing them out, like you had to be a little rugged with them. You had to rub them down, with your finger and this and that, and then you could use a hose and things like that. Nowadays I look at it and I'm like, damn, bro, I can't believe I did all that, man. What a mess. We talking about what a mess is what I made, But yeah, so I got the stuff from Office Max. I came back and I actually, burnt the screen. I did, my normal setup. The black on the transparency was so dark that the print came out perfect. So I had what, 2 screens? Yeah. So I did the original Whytebooyee and I did the back of the shirt, which was just a WB with a drip. It was like a drip print. And that was going to be my back of the shirt, and the other one was going to be the front of my shirt. So I made them both. They both came out perfect, And next step is how was I going to print it? Because I don't have a printing table. I didn't have anything. So so I had a squeegee, yeah, and I had ink, right. So now the next thing to do is so once the screens were done, I let them dry. I was happy with my life and myself because I actually got it done. Knowing that, where was I going to go with this? Was I even going to be able to sell a shirt? Was I going to be able to do anything? Or am I just doing it for myself? Whatever. So I thought to myself, I was watching videos again and I was like, what can I do? Blah, blah, blah. So my wife has a nice looking coffee table in the living room. Well, she did. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to use the coffee table because I made a jig like of wood and I put it on top of the coffee table. And I was able to put a shirt right on top of that. And I was able to clamp it off onto the coffee table on all 4 corners. So the shirt wasn't moving. So then what I did is because, learning the difference between the inks, meaning like the black inks, like how it goes on the shirt, and the white inks are very, it's the first time I've, realized that white inks are not friendly. They're definitely not friendly, and they're, the way that they print, that you have to make sure that you, mix them up really, really good, because even though if you mix them for 15 minutes, they're still heavy. But this was back then. This is when I started in 2016. The inks have they've come a long way, but, white is always a pain in the butt. You know what I mean? It's heavy. It's a heavy ink. So I couldn't print white. Well, I didn't know that yet. I printed one shirt white. It came out pretty good, but whoa, let's not go too far. So I was like, all right, you know what? I can use black. The black ink is not thick. It goes on. It feels like a water-based ink, but it's not. It's a plastisol. So it was the first time that I was understanding what was the difference between plastisol and water ink. The discharge. So I had a choice of which way I was going to go, and I was recommended to use the plastisol because it's a more durable ink and it sits on top of the shirt. So I was like, all right, let me try it out. So I took the shirt and I made my little thing on my wife's coffee table, and I took the screen and I placed the screen right on top of the shirt, right? I put a little bit of ink on it, and because it was only, a 5-inch, 11 long saying, white boy saying, it wasn't too much, like I didn't have to dump tons of ink on it. So I put 2 weights on each side of the screen, one on the top, one on the bottom, in the corners. And I took the squeegee and I slowly squeegeed and slowly squeegeed. Did it a couple times. Popped it off. Looked great. It was perfect. You know what I mean? So I did that with a couple shirts that I bought. I ordered shirts. I forgot where I ordered them from at that time. I don't know. But I had a group of shirts, and I ended up printing a whole bunch of those shirts that just said White Boy on them. It was really cool. And then from that point on, then I had to dry them somehow, or at least touch dry them. So I ended up purchasing a heat gun. So I went to Lowe's. I picked up a heat gun for like $20, $25. I still have that heat gun today. It don't work, but I still have it. And I would heat it up, enough so that it was, dry to touch, so that it wasn't going to smear or nothing like that. And then I'd put all the shirts to the side. Then I would do the backs. So I did all the backs the same way. So I ended up doing like 5 or 6 shirts at that time, at that moment. It took me a while because, you got to sit there and put clamps and hold down the shirts and everything, stuff like that. But, for my first production of doing shirts, it was cool. It was good, That's also when I learned that you cannot do white shirts. Like, you can't do white ink like that. White ink, it presses through, it gets clumpy. It needs to be, like with black ink, you could actually have the screen against the clothes and print on it, and then you could pull it off and really doesn't leave anything. But the white ink itself needs to be, a little bit away from the garment itself. Like, you got to give it, you got to set it up. It's very hard to do it when you're just doing it on a table, but, you have to give it some spacing, So that was a no-go. There was one shirt I actually made, my friend Keith got, and it was actually done in white. And it came out really good, and that was probably, at that time, the only white print that actually came out good. Everything else was, was bad, because of the way that it printed. But now, the next step from that point on was, how do I actually get this ink up to, 320 degrees, 330 degrees, so that it actually, sets into the clothes itself? How do I get it up there? Because the heat gun's not going to really, I could sit there and do that, but then, think about it, it's not going to work, So, brilliant mind of mine, I was like, wait, it's just like a conveyor dryer, right? It's just like an oven. So there you go. Boom. Just solved it. I have an oven in the house, of course. So what I did was I took out the baking trays, and I would clean. I took out the stuff from the oven, and I made a rack in the oven so that I could put two shirts in, right? So what I would do is I would set the oven up to like 375, right? That's what I would set it to, because that's another thing. I got a temperature gauge, one of those digital ones that you could tell what the temperature is, because I was using that for the heat gun. So I would do that while I was checking the oven and stuff like that. So I would take the clothes, I'd put it on the baking trays, and I would put them in there, and I would sit there and I would wait like 15, 20 minutes. No, 15, 20, what am I talking? 15, 20 seconds. And then I would pull them out and they would be, burning, steaming. You know what I mean? But a lot of those shirts, which is funny, a lot of those black ink original White Boy shirts that I still have around the house, like the kids wear and everything else like that, would you believe that ink is still on these shirts? And these kids probably wash these shirts 20 and 30 times. And that was the original stuff that I did. I don't recommend doing that. I don't recommend doing that. I was like, because, you know what? You can cause a fire, which there's been plenty of times, like when I did hoodies, which I'll get to soon, that I actually lit the clothes on fire, and the clothes were like on fire inside the oven, like I was cooking clothes. It's very dangerous, this and that. And not only that, the plastisol stinks inside the oven. And not only that, the time when I was doing this, it was like before November. It was like November, and we were, it was Thanksgiving was coming. So, I'll get to that too, but I was doing so many shirts. Like, I was printing so many shirts and hoodies that the oven just smelled like plastisol. So it was like the food that we cooked for Thanksgiving, it was like turkey with the touch of plastisol. It was like the smell was like in the it was in the food. It was like, I was like, oh my god. Everything I started to do in the house is I started to, make everything into my business of doing things. All right. So now once that was all over and I started, once I had at least a little bit of an idea of how to start this and do what I have to do, then I was like, well, how am I going to sell these shirts and what am I supposed to do? So originally what I did was I basically sold them out of the back of my car, my truck, right? So I would just make a couple shirts and people were like, yo, no problem. Yeah, this and that. I mean, $10 a shirt, you know what I mean? Can't go wrong for that. I mean, I'm not a brand name that you're getting $50, $60 a shirt. This is like DIYs, Everybody was pretty interested in it and people were buying shirts. So I was like, wow, I'm actually getting a return from this. I was like, so how am I going to do this? I can't keep printing on the coffee table. My wife's already pissed off that, there's notches and stuff all over the furniture and things like that. So I was like, what can I do, to step up my game? Right? Because I want to try something else too. I want to try to do hoodies and everything else. Like, it's getting cold outside. I got to start pushing merchandise because that's the only way I'm going to get money back. And that's why I always told my wife from the very beginning when I was doing this business does not affect my daily job that pays for my bills. So if I need to do anything in this business has to pay for itself. If this business can't pay for itself by me doing what I have to do and hustling it, then it's not going to work. It's just going to fall to the floor. All right, so check this out. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let me watch some more videos on YouTube about people who make their own screen printing equipment. Boom! All of a sudden, I am a carpenter, and I know how to cut. Well, this is what I did. We had a table in my backyard that we used to take out all the time, and it was for a flip cup. The drinking game flip cup, right? So we would, have this big table and stuff like that was foldable. I was like, let me take this in the house. This is going to be my screen printing table because, it was the same height as me anyway, like, waist-wise, so it was easy to work on. Then I was thinking to myself, how can I actually get enough, like, how can I buy anything that's going to be able to make me a screen printing press that's not going to cost a lot? Because, I'm still sitting on that shoestring budget, So I went to work the next day and I was actually working in Newark and I came across a house that was abandoned. A whole bunch of wood was thrown out on the side. Garbage truck was, they were getting a dumpster, this and that, whatever. So, as the best garbage picker I am, I went inside, pick-a-da-boop, and I started taking some wood out. I started taking 2x4s out. I was taking out plywood, couple other things, maybe I came home with a bunch of wood. Let's just put it that way. Wife wasn't happy about seeing garbage come through the house. But I ended up using all that wood, right? And then I went back to Lowe's and I bought myself springs. So I bought myself heavy duty springs because I had this idea that what I was going to do is I was going to use the 2x4s as like a base on the flip cup table. And I was going to make, like I guess either the platen and the arm that holds the screens. So I was like, I'm gonna make all of that out of wood and springs. Easiest thing in the world to do, right? And I bought clamps, like C clamps, and the C clamps held the screen. So long story short, I made the little setup. This and that, and I used an arm. I put a screen inside the arm part, and I lowered it, and I measured out how far I would need the beam to go out, because that would be my platen. And then I made a platen, like a t-shirt, t-shirt platen out of plywood, and then I put like a formica on top of it. Well, I did that at first. That didn't work too good. But then I just used like a sheet, like a clear sheet across it, like contact paper, and then that was my platen. So now I'm sitting there and I actually have something that actually looks pretty cool. I mean, it's better than printing on the dining room table or the coffee table or anything like that. And I'm able to put t-shirts on it, right? And I'm able to print it with just, bringing it down. And then once I'm done printing, it sprung itself back up so that it was back into position. And I made a bar go across the back so that when I put the squeegee would sit up. You know what I mean? So it wasn't falling over or falling forward, So it was actually pretty cool. It was, I have pictures of it, it's all on my website, Insta, social media and stuff like that. I still have all that, I don't have that anymore. I don't even have the board. I was pretty pissed that the board was actually gone. But, things got to go. It is what it is. The memories last, right? Yeah. So I did all that. Everything worked pretty good with that. And then I said, you know what am I going to do now? Like, I was selling shirts and I was making some money. I had I made like an extra $100 in selling shirts. I was selling t-shirts and people were like, oh yeah, give me that. I can't believe you're printing your own clothes. This is awesome. Yeah, bro, this looks good. All right, cool. So I'm selling them. So I'm like, how do I step up my game next? And one of my friends who also works in Newark, he called me up one day. He's a wholesaler, consignment. I don't know whatever he used to do. He had a warehouse. And he called me up and he was like, yo, I got a box of hoodies. And he was like, I'll give you the box of hoodie. They're assorted sizes and colors. He says, but they're all the same kind of hoodie. And he was like, I'll give it to you for $100. And I was like, well, how many hoodies are in there? He goes, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 hoodies. And I was like, all right, cool. For $100, yeah, let me go take a look at them. They were actually really good quality hoodies. Really good quality hoodies. They were, the Hanes hoodie with the media pocket in the pouch part and stuff like that. They were heavy. I was like, wow, these are really cool. And he was like, yeah, he says, I don't know if they're irregular. I don't know if they're what. He goes, we got them through a thing. He was like, if you want them, just take them. Nobody wants them, blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right, cool. So I took them home. All right. No problem. So now I'm sitting there learning how to print. Now I'm trying to do it with the hoodie because the hoodie is a thicker material. But it's no big deal. It's black ink. Boom. Done. Did the fronts, did the backs. Right? This was the big turning point of where anything was. Okay? Because I bought those hoodies, well, if you could say 30 hoodies for $100, right? We'll just say that. There was a couple of them that were ripped in there and stuff like that. Like, I sewed a couple of them. Kids wore them and stuff like that. I put Whytebooyee on them, whatever. But out of those hoodies, I sold them all. I sold them all. All. And I sold them for $15 to $20. Right? So, boom. There it goes. There's the money coming in. Now, it's a hustle. It's a hustle, man. It's a hustle. It wasn't easy. I had to print all those hoodies. I had to do all that stuff. I sold a lot of them, and a lot of legwork, making, going up to people like, yo, check this out, bro. This is hot. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to sell this to you for cheap, and stuff like that. And, I was getting people to buy. Now I got a good chunk of money, right? So now I was actually able to turn around and put the $300, well, $250, whatever it was, put the $250 back into my you want to call it a shoe box? Yeah, it's a shoe box. Put it back into the shoe box. So now I have extra money that I already took out originally from my real paycheck to buy these clothes, right? So the next day, well, not the next day. It was like next week, I called up my buddy again. I was like, dude, do you have any more of those hoodies? Because I sold them all. And he was like, what? I was like, I don't even have one for myself. I sold the one off my back. I was like, do you have any more hoodies? And they were really cool colors. They were like in orange. They were in yellow. Yellow was like weird, but they were in yellow. They were in like a light blue. It was like pastels, like for Easter or something. I don't know. Green. It was green ones. The green ones they were hot. And I was like, yo, I got a lot of pictures of people wearing the hoodies and stuff. And I'm like, yo, I sold them all. Everything's gone. And he called me back and he was like, bro, he says, I got a couple of them left. He goes, would you believe after you left? He's like, we had a whole bunch more of, stuff that was irregular and stuff like that. That's all gone. We only got a little bit left. So I went back to him, picked up a couple more, but that was it. There was really no more, and, even if you do order hoodies from, nowadays from, big companies and stuff like S&S, Alpha Border, or anybody like that, you all know, that, you're paying, it depends. It depends on what kind of hoodie that you buy. If you go for the bottom line gilding or you go for the higher amount, you could be paying anywhere from $12 to $18 for a hoodie. And that's for you to buy. That's not even talking about selling it for like $25, or whatever you can. The people listening to this are probably like, $25? I get $45 a hoodie. I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do. If I ever told somebody, at that time, oh, $45 for a hoodie, they're going to be like, what? Dude, what are you smoking? You know what I mean? It's all about the people, and and this and that, and you basically know what they'll spend. You know what they'll spend. So you're not going to tell them to spend over, because then they're going to give you a hard time. And, you're going to have to chew a little bit more on them so that they can buy it. If you give them a regular price, like how, which is fair enough, then people are like, oh, cool, yeah, I'm getting the deal. This is cool, blah, 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 no problem. A lot of those hoodies that I originally did, they're still good. I still see them, and that's like the best part about doing this kind of business is that the stuff that you create, you see it on people and it's living because it's walking, they're wearing it. I saw people in Pennsylvania one time. We went to Pennsylvania and I saw a person with a Whytebooyee shirt and I was like, I don't remember selling any, because at the time I wasn't selling them. I wasn't selling them online. I wasn't doing anything like that. And I was like, I don't remember selling shirts like this. And I was like, all right, cool. And then we went to a thrift store and I saw my clothes in the thrift store. I was like, oh, somebody give it a good home. But, it's as much as you do and stuff like that, it gets around. And, I was seeing one time I was walking down the street in Broadway with my daughter and some girls walking up wearing one of the designs from Whytebooyee. And, we walked right past her. And, she'd even look like, oh, I know who he is. He's the one that made it. Or my daughter was like, like, hello, we all go to the same school kind of deal. It's like, where'd you get that from? I sold a lot, though. And people were wearing it, bro. It's a good feeling and stuff. But, to go back to that, when I said before about, burning the house down with the oven, those hoodies, when I realized that the hoodies themselves, like, is very hard to do in the conventional oven, heating them up because they're so thick and they get crusted like from the heat too quickly. So you have to actually sit and do it for a little bit longer and stuff like that, but at a lower temperature. So it was all like trial and error and doing things. But, now that I look back and I look at this stuff and I'm like, wow, look at all the stuff that I did. How did I get here from there? That's how I did it, And it's still going on today with, the stuff that, I still create and I still do and stuff. And this is just the beginning of it. You know what I mean? After all this was all over, then I was printing for a while and I was like, you know what? I have to step my game up because, I'm blowing my son's lamps, his lizard lamps. I'm blowing them. That I went from using just a spotlight UV bulb. I actually ended up buying like a fish tank that had 2 bulbs in it, like long length bulbs, and they were UV bulb. Well, I made them UV bulbs, and I was doing it that way. That way was actually trash. It didn't work. I mean, it worked for a while, but you had to leave it on for a long time. The iguana lamp was so much better. But, to get a better detail and to get a better look and a better thing, you have to step your game up. You got to get better stuff so that, you can make a better quality product. Not only that, you could start printing with different inks because every ink has a different personality to it, and the black inks were easy to use, they were very light and stuff. White was very impossible for me to use. Even after I bought that screen, I made that screen printing press, it was still kind of hard because I wasn't able to get the ink to dry enough. Like I couldn't get it to reach the temperature that it needed to reach, and things like that. So I would make Whytebooyee shirts with the Whytebooyee design, and a couple washes later, it was half. It was it would say boy on it. That's all it would say, But the black ink never came off. But the white was a problem. I was getting frustrated with that too because I wanted to print on white. I wanted to print white lettering, especially on black shirts. I like black shirts. It's a rich color, black. And I wanted to print on that. I wanted to print. And I was like, I have to find a way of doing it. I even bought red to try red out. All my inks and stuff, same place, Total Ink Solutions. When I started, that's all I got where my stuff was from. But I bought the red. The red was beautiful color, this and that, but it was the same problem as the whites. It had to reach a certain temperature. And if it didn't reach that certain temperature, then you would have the same problem. It would print, it would look nice. And then a couple washes later, you're like, oh man, what did I do? Now people are going to complain that, I screwed up, and legitimately you did. And so this is where I'm going to probably stop this episode, just so that, you get an idea of everything. But next episode, I'll talk about going back to college dorms and buying equipment from the colleges. Because I've done this in the colleges. Like, we used to do screen printing for like posters and stuff like that. Like, I've done it in Jersey State College. We were doing boards and stuff like that and things. And we had a screen printing press, but it wasn't a press that was for clothes. It was just for posters. It was it had the same kind of idea and stuff like that, but it wasn't. But I found on a college thing, same college, I found on it that people were selling screen printing equipment. So I was like, I could buy it and just convert it, because they were like poster board screen printing equipment. So I was like, what? Now that I got some cash rolling in, let me invest back into the company and let me get some better equipment, because I always wanted to get a better, table, or even a single. If I could buy a single, I was happy buying a single, because then I could have, what I was going to do was upgrade my flip cup table and have my homemade one on the one side and the good one on the other side. Just in case, if I had to do something different that, it was a little bit more sturdy because it was metal, compared to wood and stuff like that. But I don't know. Well, I'll get to that, and I'll get to that in the next episode. And then we'll get to moving on further, and my company being bought over at the time where I was working for 18 years. And me investing a heavy chunk of money into the screen printing process, which actually took me into the part of where I am actually today. So thanks a lot for listening. You guys have a good and blessed week, blessed day, whichever you want. This will probably be posted on Thursday, the 25th, I guess. Thursday, Friday, whoever knows. All right. Thanks a lot for listening. Bye.